Lucas had always been the adventurous type. A weekend road trip to escape the grind of city life seemed like the perfect way to clear his mind. He had a map, a full tank of gas, and a keen interest in exploring lesser-known destinations. He had heard whispers about a mysterious, abandoned town hidden deep in the woods, a town that had been erased from every map and every record. Of course, that was too tempting to ignore. The town was called Harrowsville, and it was known only in fragmented stories, passed down in hushed tones by the older generations. No one knew what had happened to it, but Lucas was determined to find it. A little research had revealed a faint trail on an outdated map, old, forgotten roads that no GPS could track. After hours of driving down narrow, winding paths, the trees began to close in on both sides. The world around him seemed to grow quieter, the air thicker. It was as if the forest itself was absorbing sound. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when he finally saw it, a small sign, weathered and forgotten, hanging loosely from a rusted post. Harrowsville, population unknown. Lucas smiled, heart racing. He had found it, but as he drove further into the town, a sense of unease settled over him. The houses were old, falling apart, some with shattered windows and doors hanging off their hinges. Yet there was an unsettling quality to the place. It was as if it had been frozen in time, a snapshot of an era long past. There were no cars in the streets, no signs of life, and yet, something was off. The town felt watched. Lucas parked his car in front of a crumbling house with faded white paint. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp wood and decay. His instincts told him to turn back, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out, the faint sound of his footsteps the only noise in the oppressive silence. As he walked down the main street, the buildings on either side seemed to loom over him, their empty windows like hollow eyes. He was about to turn down a side street when something caught his attention, a figure standing at the far end of the road. A woman. Her clothes were outdated, old-fashioned, almost from another time, and she stood perfectly still, staring at him with vacant eyes. Her face was pale, almost unnatural, and her hair hung limply over her shoulders. "Hello," Lucas called out, his voice barely breaking the silence. The woman didn't respond, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. There was something wrong about her. Without thinking, Lucas began walking toward her. But as he got closer, he noticed something else, more figures, emerging from the shadows. All of them were watching him. There were no children, no elderly people, just pale, expressionless adults, standing frozen in place. The woman turned her head slightly, as though acknowledging him, but still said nothing. And then, something even stranger happened. Another figure, standing in the doorway of a nearby house, raised its hand and waved. Lucas froze. The figures didn't move like normal people. Their motions were too slow, too deliberate, as if they were trapped in a dream. His heartbeat quickened. Something was wrong. The air grew colder, and the sound of his breath became louder in the silence. Suddenly, a voice rang out, the sound unmistakable yet distant. A deep, resonating voice. Welcome home. The words made his skin crawl. The figures slowly began to move, their heads tilting as they stared at him with unsettling focus. Then, as if responding to an unspoken cue, they all began to walk toward him. In a blind panic, Lucas turned and ran. His feet pounded against the cracked pavement as the distant voice echoed in his ears, "Welcome home, welcome home." He didn't dare look back. Lucas ran faster, breath ragged, until he reached his car. His hands fumbled with the keys as the sound of footsteps behind him grew louder, closer. He slammed the door shut and floored the accelerator, tearing out of the town as fast as he could. The town of Harrowsville quickly vanished in his rearview mirror, but the feeling lingered. The oppressive silence, the eyes that had followed him, and the chilling voice, "Welcome home." Lucas never spoke of what happened that night, but he couldn't forget. In his dreams, the town still haunted him. In the corner of his vision, he saw the figures standing silently, waiting for him to return. And every now and then, when he drove through the woods on a lonely road, he could swear he saw a faded sign in the distance, a sign that read **Harrowsville**. But the population never changed. It remained unknown.